Drevon Kessler's body betrayed him in the worst possible way. Intimacy triggered something devastating, something he couldn't control. Every woman who got close left before dawn, shaken and bound by silence. After the lawsuit that cost him millions and his reputation, he built walls no one could breach. Then Alondra Frost was hired to redesign his estate, and when he tried to push her away, she did something no woman had ever done. She locked the door and refused to leave. Welcome back, my amazing and supportive family. I promise to always deliver the best captivating stories. If this is your first time on this channel, comment below where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything. Alondra Frost learned to read people through the spaces they built around themselves. At 28, she'd made a career out of it. Trauma-informed architecture for people whose bodies and minds carried damage no one else could see. She understood that better than most. 5 years watching her mother die slowly. A fiancé who left because he couldn't compete with a ghost. At 26, finished her degree, specialized in therapeutic design, and built walls around herself that looked like ambition. The Kessler contract arrived on a Tuesday. Private wellness estate, unlimited budget, 8-week deadline. The NDA was 40 pages long. Most were 10, maybe 15. This one had clauses protecting him. Billionaire Drevon Kessler. She'd heard the name whispered in industry circles. Alondra signed anyway. Someone building walls this high wasn't dangerous. They were terrified. The estate was 40 minutes outside the city, hidden behind gates that required 3 security checks before they'd even let her onto the property. The house itself was stunning. Drevon met her at the door. Just him, standing 3 feet back like he'd measured the distance. He was younger than she expected, early 30s. Tall. His handshake was brief, professional, and released half a second faster than normal. Ms. Frost. Mr. Kessler. He stepped aside, giving her a wide path to enter. The house was a mausoleum, expensive and empty, every surface perfect and calculated. She'd seen it before, people who bought taste because they didn't trust their own feelings. The East Wing, he said, moving down a hallway designed to keep people separated. I need it converted into a recovery suite. Medical functionality, residential aesthetic. Privacy is non-negotiable. Alondra pulled out her tablet. What kind of recovery? Physical therapy? Post-surgical? Neurological? Does it matter? Everything matters. She stopped walking, forced him to turn and face her. I can't design a healing space if I don't know what someone's healing from. His jaw tightened. Privacy. That's what they're healing from. I need a space where someone can be completely alone. Separate entrance, separate systems, total autonomy. You mean control. His eyes snapped to hers. Sharp, guarded. Excuse me? Autonomy is a choice. Control is survival. She held his gaze. Which one are we designing for? For a moment, he looked like he might end the meeting right there. Then something shifted. Something small and exhausted, and real. Both, he said quietly. The East Wing was worse than she imagined. White walls, fluorescent lights, hospital furniture arranged like a prison cell. No color. No warmth. No indication a human being was supposed to exist here, let alone heal. How long have you been using this space? She asked. I don't. Then who's it for? Silence. Alondra ran her hand along the wall, feeling the cold seep into her palm. Mr. Kessler, I've designed spaces for PTSD survivors, chronic pain patients, people recovering from violence they'll never talk about. This room, she turned to face him. This room is punishing someone. I don't know who, but that's what this is. His face went blank, carefully, deliberately blank. It's for guests, he said. Guests you're protecting or guests you're hiding? That's not. He stopped, breathed, started again. I need a space where someone experiencing severe physical trauma can recover in complete isolation. They need control over every variable: light, sound, temperature. They need to know, with absolute certainty, that no one can enter without permission. The way he said "they" made her chest tight. Physical trauma triggered by what? His hands flexed at his sides. That's not relevant. It's the only thing that's relevant. She kept her voice soft but unyielding. Is it pain? Panic? Sensory overload? Because each one requires completely different design solutions. He stared at her, like she'd just spoken a language he thought he was the only one who understood. Pain, he said finally. Severe, unpredictable, triggered by... He stopped, jaw working. By intimacy. The air between them went still. Alondra didn't react, didn't flinch or soften, or do any of the things people usually did when someone confessed something that raw. She just nodded, mind already racing through design solutions. Then we strip everything, start from scratch. She pulled up reference images on her tablet. Multiple zones, a medical area that doesn't feel clinical, a comfort zone that doesn't feel vulnerable, a control panel within arm's reach so someone can manage the environment without moving, materials that regulate temperature naturally, acoustic design for complete silence or white noise, circadian lighting they can override instantly. That's not possible in residential architecture. It is if you stop thinking of this as a guest room and start thinking of it as adaptive design for invisible disability. She turned the tablet toward him. I've done this. Not exactly. This. But close. He moved closer without thinking. For 5 seconds, maybe 6, they stood less than a foot apart, both looking at her screen. Then he jerked backward like he'd been burned. I'm sorry. The apology was automatic, practiced, and it broke her heart a little. For what? I need distance. It's not negotiable. Alondra kept her expression neutral. Okay. Then we build that into the workflow. Virtual check-ins, spaced walkthroughs. It's just another parameter, Mr. Kessler. Not a problem. Something in his shoulders dropped. Just slightly. Just enough. 8 weeks, he said, forcing the conversation back to business. I need this done in 8 weeks. That's aggressive for this level of customization. I'll pay whatever it takes. It's not about money. It's about craft. She paused. But I'll make it work. One condition. His guard slammed back into place. Which is? Honesty. If something's not working, you tell me. Not the polite version, the real version. She met his eyes. I've spent my whole life around people who suffered quietly because they didn't want to be difficult. I won't design a healing space if the person it's for won't tell me the truth. Drevon Kessler stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Small. Fleeting. But real. Deal. Alondra didn't know it yet, but she'd just become the first person in years to see him as someone who deserved honesty instead of pity. And he'd just met the first person who understood that healing wasn't about comfort. It was about truth. The 8 weeks ahead would test them both. The work started 3 days later. Alondra arrived at 8 in the morning with her team, 2 contractors, a lighting specialist, and enough material samples to build 3 different rooms. Drevon met them at the gate, but not at the door. He watched from a second-floor window as they unloaded equipment, his silhouette a dark shape behind glass. He communicated through text. East wing is open. Kitchen stocked if you need anything. I'll be in the north office if you have questions. Professional. Distant. Exactly what she expected. The first week was purely demolition, ripping out the cold white walls, the harsh lighting, the furniture that felt like punishment. Her team worked efficiently, used to her exacting standards. She stayed late every night, sketching plans by the light of construction lamps, tweaking measurements, obsessing over details no one else would notice. Drevon appeared sometimes, never close, always in doorways or at the far end of rooms, maintaining that careful 3-foot radius like it was a physical law he couldn't break. The acoustic panels, he said one afternoon, standing in the hallway while she knelt inside the gutted space. Will they actually block sound completely? Not completely. Nothing does. But enough that someone inside won't hear movement in other parts of the house. She looked up at him. Why? Is that a problem? No. He paused. It's necessary. She wanted to ask why, wanted to push. But she'd promised honesty, not interrogation. So she nodded and went back to work. He left without saying goodbye. The second week, patterns emerged. Drevon was always awake when she arrived, always watching from somewhere, the north office, the library. Once, she caught him on the roof terrace at dawn, coffee in hand, staring at nothing. He never ate with them, never joined her team for lunch breaks or casual conversation. But every evening, after her contractors left, she'd find things. A fresh pot of coffee in the kitchen, still hot. Her favorite tea, she'd mentioned it once, days ago, stocked in the cabinet. Takeout menus with specific items circled, like suggestions from someone who'd noticed she forgot to eat when she was focused. Small things, thoughtful things. Things that required paying attention. She started staying late, told herself it was about the project timeline, the aggressive deadline, the complexity of adaptive design. But really, it was because the house felt less empty after dark. Because sometimes, around 10 or 11, her phone would buzz. Still working? Yes. You? Always. You should sleep, so should you. Text conversations that said nothing and everything. Questions about design choices that turned into questions about life, how she got into architecture, why he bought this specific property, what her mother was like, why he built spaces for other people but lived like a guest in his own home. That last question, she didn't ask, but she noticed. Every room in the house was beautiful, carefully designed, comfortable. But none of them felt occupied. The kitchen looked like a showroom. The living room had books arranged by color, never read. His bedroom, she'd glimpsed it once when a door was left open, was pristine, sterile. A hotel room someone had been living in for years without ever unpacking. You design spaces for people, she said one night. The words sent into her phone at midnight when she should have been asleep. But you don't live in them. Why? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. I don't know how. Her chest went tight. Want me to teach you? The dots stopped. No response came. She thought maybe she'd pushed too far, crossed some invisible line. Then, 5 minutes later, maybe. The third week, something shifted. Her contractors finished the structural work and moved on to other projects. It was just her now, doing the detail work that couldn't be outsourced. Installing the smart lighting system, programming the environmental controls, arranging furniture in configurations that could be changed based on need. Drevon helped, not directly. But he'd appear with tools she needed before she asked. He'd test the blackout shades while she adjusted the motor speed. He'd sit in the space, always near the door, always ready to leave, and tell her what felt wrong. Too bright, too cold, too much pressure from the air circulation system. How do you know? She asked once, watching him flinch away from a heating vent. Most people wouldn't notice that. I notice everything. His voice was flat. I have to. Why? He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time since they'd met, his careful composure cracked. Because my body doesn't work the way it's supposed to. The air between them went still. Alondra didn't move, didn't speak, just waited, giving him space to continue or retreat. He chose to continue. There's a condition, he said slowly, like each word cost him something. Rare, neurological. It triggers severe pain in response to. He stopped, breathed. Physical arousal, touch, intimacy. Anything that's supposed to feel good becomes, his hands flexed. It becomes unbearable. Alondra's heart was pounding, but she kept her face neutral. Is there treatment? Management. Not cure. Stress makes it worse. So does proximity to, he looked away, to people I'm attracted to. The confession hung in the air like smoke. The lawsuit, she said quietly. That's what happened. His jaw tightened. I didn't know. Not until it was too late. His voice cracked. I hurt her. Badly. The kind of harm that doesn't go away. And I couldn't even explain why because I didn't understand it myself. By the time I got diagnosed, she'd already filed. Already hired lawyers who made me sound like a monster. You're not a monster. You don't know that. The words came out harsh, defensive. You don't know what it's like to want someone and know that wanting them is the most dangerous thing you could do. To feel your body betray you in the exact moment you're supposed to. He stopped, breathing hard. I settled. Paid her enough to cover therapy for life. Signed agreements that I'd never contact her again. And I built this. He gestured to the house, the empty, beautiful rooms. A place where I could exist without hurting anyone. Alondra stood slowly, carefully, maintaining distance. Is that why you hired me? To build a space for when it happens again? Yes. The admission was raw. I thought if I had somewhere safe, somewhere designed for this, then maybe I could— He laughed, bitter and broken. I don't even know. Try again? Risk it? It was a stupid idea. It's not stupid. She took one step closer. Not into his space, just closer. It's hopeful. And hope isn't stupid. Hope is dangerous. His eyes met hers, and she saw it. The fear, the loneliness, the desperate, aching want for something he believed he could never have. Hope makes you think you can have things you can't. Like what? He looked at her for a long moment. Too long. Long enough that she felt it. In her chest, the weight of everything he wasn't saying. Like someone who stays, he whispered. The words hit her like a physical thing. She realized, suddenly, that she'd been there for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of late nights, and careful distance, and text conversations that felt like confessions. 3 weeks longer than anyone else had lasted, and she had no intention of leaving. Drevon, she said softly, using his first name for the first time. I'm not going anywhere. His expression shattered. You don't understand what you're saying. I understand, perfectly. She held his gaze. You think desire equals damage, that wanting someone means hurting them. But you're wrong. I have a medical diagnosis that says otherwise. You have a condition that requires accommodation. That's not the same thing. She took a breath. I design spaces for people whose bodies don't work the way they're supposed to. I understand adaptation. I understand limits. And I understand that just because something is difficult doesn't mean it's impossible. Alondra, I'm not saying I have answers. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm just saying— She paused, choosing her words carefully. I'm saying I see you. The real you. Not the rumors, or the NDAs, or the walls you've built. And I'm still here. For a moment, he looked like he might cry, or run, or both. Instead, he just nodded. Once. Sharp and small. Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing through the empty house. Alondra stood alone in the half-finished room, her heart racing, her hands shaking. She'd just promised to stay. And somewhere, in the complicated mess of what she was feeling, she realized she'd meant it. Not because she wanted to fix him, but because for the first time since her mother died, since her engagement ended, since she'd learned to build walls instead of homes, for the first time, she wanted to try. Everything changed after that night. Drevon still kept his distance, still communicated through texts more than words, still disappeared for hours into parts of the house Alondra never saw. But there was a new weight to it now, a tension that hummed in the space between them like a live wire. She felt it every time they were in the same room. The project was nearly complete. The East Wing had transformed into something beautiful and functional, a space that could hold someone's pain without amplifying it. Soft lighting that adjusted to circadian rhythms, temperature controls within arm's reach, acoustic panels that created silence so complete you could hear your own heartbeat, materials chosen for sensory comfort, not aesthetics. It was a masterpiece of adaptive design. It was also a cage he'd built for himself, and they both knew it. The occupancy sensors, Drevon said one evening, standing in the doorway while she made final adjustments. They're too sensitive. They registered movement when I was 10 feet away. Alondra looked up from her tablet. That's the point. Anyone entering the radius triggers an alert to whoever's inside. What if the person inside doesn't want to know someone's close? His voice was tight. What if knowing makes it worse? She studied him. He looked exhausted. shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there a week ago, tension in his shoulders that never released. "Then we adjust the threshold," she said quietly. "What distance feels safe?" "There is no safe distance." The words came out sharper than he intended. He closed his eyes, breathed. "I'm sorry. That's not... I didn't mean... Drivon." She stood slowly, setting the tablet aside. "When's the last time you slept?" "I sleep. When's the last time you slept well?" Silence. She took a step toward him. Just one. He went rigid. "Don't," he said. "I'm 10 feet away. I know exactly how far you are." His voice was strained. "I always know." The confession hit her like a punch. He tracked her proximity the way some people tracked time, constantly, unconsciously, a survival mechanism that never turned off. "Does it hurt right now?" she asked softly. "No." He swallowed hard. "Not yet. But it will." "How do you know?" "Because I want you closer." The words tore out of him raw and desperate, and wanting always leads to pain. Alondra's breath caught. The air between them felt electric, dangerous, impossibly fragile. "What if it didn't?" she whispered. "It always does. But what if?" "There is no what if," his voice cracked. "This isn't a design problem you can solve, Alondra. This isn't about better materials or smarter systems. This is my body. This is my life. And no amount of hoping is going to change the fact that getting close to me comes with a cost no one should have to pay. You don't get to decide what I can handle." "Yes, I do." He stepped back, widening the distance between them. "Because I'm the one who has to live with the damage when this falls apart." "When? Not if." "There is no if." His laugh was bitter. "You think you understand, but you don't. You think this is about accommodation and adaptation, but it's not. It's about the fact that 3 weeks from now, or 3 months, or 3 years, eventually, you'll touch me. Eventually, we'll get careless. And when that happens, when my body does what it always does, you'll look at me the way she did." "The way who did?" "Like I'm broken." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Like I'm something that needs to be fixed, or avoided, or pitied. And I can't..." He stopped, jaw working. "I can't watch you learn to hate me." "I could never hate you. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." "Alondra," he made a sound between a laugh and a sob. "You've been here 4 weeks. 4 weeks of careful distance and professional boundaries. You haven't seen what happens when those boundaries break. You haven't felt what it's like to want something so badly, it literally destroys you." She took another step forward. "Then show me." "No. Show me what you're so afraid of." "I said no." The words exploded out of him. He stumbled backward, hitting the wall, breathing hard. "This ends now. The project is done. I'll pay you for 8 weeks. Consider the contract fulfilled." Alondra went cold. "You're firing me. I'm releasing you. There's a difference." "Is there?" Her voice was shaking now, anger rising hot and fast in her chest. "Because it sounds like you're running away. I'm protecting you. I don't need protection. Everyone needs protection from me." His shout echoed through the empty wing. "That's the point. That's what you're not understanding. I am the danger in this scenario, not some abstract condition or unfortunate circumstance. Me, my body, my desire. And the closer you get, the worse it becomes." "So what?" She moved closer, deliberately closing the distance. "You're just going to live like this forever? Alone in this beautiful empty house, designing spaces for other people while you exist in the gaps between rooms?" "Yes." His voice was flat, final. "Because that's the only way no one gets hurt. You're already hurt." She was 5 feet away now, close enough to see the pulse hammering in his throat. "You're in pain right now, and I'm not even touching you. Alondra, please." His back was against the wall, nowhere left to retreat. "Please stop." "Why?" "Because I'm barely holding on." The confession ripped out of him. "Because every cell in my body is screaming at me to close this distance, and I know what happens if I do. And I can't. I can't hurt you. I can't watch another person He stopped, breathing ragged. "Another person you what?" Her voice was barely audible. He looked at her with eyes full of anguish. Another person I care about. The words hung between them like a detonation. Alondra felt tears burning in her throat, but refused to let them fall. You think caring about me means pushing me away? It's the only option I have. No, it's the only option you'll allow yourself. She held his gaze. Because you've decided that you don't deserve connection. That wanting something means you're dangerous. That your condition defines the limits of your entire life. It does. It doesn't. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You know what I see when I look at you. Not someone broken. Not someone dangerous. I see someone who's been surviving alone for so long he's forgotten what it's like to let someone help carry the weight. You don't understand what you're asking for. Then explain it to me. She took one more step, 4 feet between them now, close enough to touch if she reached out. She didn't. Tell me exactly what it costs to want you, because maybe, I'm willing to pay it. You're not. You don't get to decide that. Her voice rose, sharp with frustration. You don't get to make choices for me based on what you think I can handle. I'm a grown woman who's survived things you know nothing about. I've watched someone I love die slowly. I've had someone walk away because I was too much work. I've rebuilt my entire life from nothing. And you think I can't handle complicated? You think I can't handle difficult? This isn't difficult, Alondra. This is impossible. Nothing is impossible. Some things are just harder. You don't. He stopped, something breaking in his expression. You don't understand what it costs to want me. Then tell me. She was shouting now, months of her own carefully controlled emotions finally erupting. Stop protecting me from information I have a right to know. Stop deciding what I can and can't endure. You want honesty? Here's honesty. I have stayed longer than anyone else. I have learned your patterns and your boundaries, and the exact distance you need to feel safe. I have designed a space meant to hold your pain because I thought maybe, you'd let me help you carry it. And now you're telling me it was all for nothing? That the second things get real, you're just going to push me away? Yes, his voice cracked, because keeping you at a distance is the only way I know how to care about you without destroying you. You're not destroying me, you're destroying us. There is no us! The words came out like a roar. There can't be. Don't you understand? Every moment you're close to me, my body is preparing for a pain response that could last hours. Days. The last time He stopped, chest heaving. The last time I let someone get close, I blacked out from the pain. Woke up in a hospital with her screaming about what I'd done. And I don't even remember it, Alondra. I don't remember hurting her because I was too far gone. So forgive me if I'm not willing to risk that happening again with you. The room went silent except for their ragged breathing. Alondra felt something inside her crack wide open. Not pity, not fear, just devastating, overwhelming clarity about what he'd been carrying alone. I'm sorry that happened to you, she said quietly. I'm sorry you've been living with that guilt. But you're punishing yourself for something you couldn't control. Intent doesn't matter when the outcome is harm. It matters to me. Well, it shouldn't. His voice had gone cold, defensive. You should leave, Alondra. Take your payment. Finish your other projects. Forget you ever met me. I can't do that. You have to. Why? Because I'm asking you to. Something desperate and raw broke through his voice. Because I'm begging you to walk away before we... He couldn't finish. Alondra stared at him, this man who'd designed elaborate systems to keep people safe from himself, who tracked her proximity like a threat, who wanted her so badly it caused him physical agony. And she realized he wasn't going to change his mind. He'd already decided on this ending. Fine, she said, her voice hollow. I'll go. She turned and walked toward the door, each step feeling like breaking. Alondra. She stopped but didn't turn around. You get to decide how much pain you're willing to endure, but you don't get to decide how much I can? Her voice shook. And the fact that you're choosing to endure loneliness instead of risking connection, That's not protection, Drevon. That's just fear. She walked out of the East Wing, through the beautiful empty house, past rooms designed for living that no one would ever inhabit. She got in her car and drove away from the estate, tears finally spilling over, her hands gripping the wheel so hard they ached. Behind her, Drevon stood alone in the space she'd built for him, a perfect sanctuary for suffering, and he'd never felt more trapped in his life. Alondra sat in her apartment 3 days later, staring at the symposium invitation on her coffee table. She'd been invited to speak weeks ago. Before Drevon? Before the estate? Before she'd made the mistake of falling for someone who needed her. Again. Her phone buzzed. Her best friend, Sadie. You going to the symposium or hiding? I don't know, she typed back. You're doing it again, Sadie replied, choosing someone who can't choose you back. Alondra's chest tightened. She wanted to argue, wanted to say this was different. But was it? She'd spent 5 years caring for her mother, lost her engagement because she couldn't put her fiancé first, rebuilt her entire life around the idea that she wouldn't lose herself to someone else's needs again. And then she'd walked straight into Drevon Kessler's life and done exactly that. I'm not his caretaker, she said aloud to her empty apartment. I'm not. But wasn't she? Designing his space, managing his boundaries, staying through his pain. When did accommodation become self-erasure? She picked up the invitation. If she went to the symposium, she'd see him, and she didn't know if that would break her resolve or strengthen it. I'm going, she texted Sadie, but not for him. For me. I need to see if he's changed, and if he hasn't, then you walk away for real, Sadie finished. Yeah, Alondra typed. Then I walk away for real. She bought the plane ticket before she could change her mind. 3 weeks. Drevon counted them in the silence that filled every corner of the house. 21 days since Alondra walked out. 504 hours since he'd heard her voice. 30,240 minutes since he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. He told himself it was the right decision, the safe decision, the only decision that wouldn't end with someone getting hurt. But the East Wing sat finished and empty, a monument to everything he was too afraid to reach for. He walked through it sometimes, late at night when sleep wouldn't come, which was always now. The space was perfect, every detail exactly as it should be. She'd built him a sanctuary, and he'd never felt more trapped in his life. The invitation came on a Tuesday, the National Design Symposium, annual event, industry leaders, press coverage. They wanted him to speak about adaptive architecture and the future of inclusive residential design. Normally he'd decline, send a polite refusal, make a generous donation and stay invisible. But the keynote speaker was listed right there on the program, Alondra Frost. Trauma-informed spatial design. His chest went tight. She'd be there, in the same building, maybe the same room. He accepted the invitation before he could talk himself out of it. The symposium was held in a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. 200 people filled the space. Architects, designers, developers, journalists. Drevon arrived early, found a position near the back wall where he could see everything and everyone, especially her. She walked in 20 minutes before the program started, and his breath stopped. She looked thinner, tired, beautiful. Her hair pulled back, wearing a blazer he'd never seen before, carrying herself with the same quiet competence that had first made him notice her. She didn't see him. Or maybe she did, and chose not to acknowledge it. Either way, she took her seat in the front row and never looked back. The program started. 3 speakers before her. Drevon heard none of it. His entire focus was on the woman sitting 30 feet away, the one he'd pushed away because he was too afraid to let her stay. Then she stood, walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, looked out at the crowd with steady eyes. I design spaces for people who've learned not to trust spaces, she began. Her voice was clear, controlled, carrying weight without volume. For bodies that don't work the way they're supposed to. For minds that carry trauma the rest of us can't see. And for years, I thought my job was to make those spaces comfortable. Safe? Predictable? She paused, and something flickered across her face. I was wrong. My job isn't to eliminate risk. It's to make room for people to choose their own risk, to create environments where someone can say, "This is what I need," and have the architecture listen. Drivon's hands clenched into fists. "The most important project I ever worked on," she continued, "was for someone who believed he was too dangerous to be close to, who'd built walls so high he couldn't remember what it felt like to let someone in. And my mistake," her voice caught, just slightly. "My mistake was thinking I could design him a space where he'd feel safe, because safety isn't a room, it's a choice, and no amount of perfect architecture can make that choice for someone." The room was silent. "He taught me that the bravest thing you can do isn't building better walls, it's deciding when to lower them." She looked down at her notes, then back up. "Even when you're terrified of what happens next." She stepped away from the podium to applause. Drivon couldn't move. She'd just told their entire story to a room full of strangers without saying his name once. And somehow, everyone in the room had heard it anyway. 2 more speakers, then a break. Then panel discussions he was supposed to be part of. He couldn't do it. Couldn't sit on a stage and talk about adaptive design like he understood the first thing about adaptation, when he'd spent 3 weeks alone in a house built for living that felt like a grave. He was halfway to the exit when someone called his name. "Mr. Kessler," the symposium director. Anxious smile, clipboard clutched like a shield. "You're up next. The panel on residential innovation? We're ready for you." Every instinct screamed at him to leave. Make an excuse. Disappear back into the safety of isolation. But Alondra's words were still echoing in his head. The bravest thing you can do isn't building better walls. It's deciding when to lower them. 2 minutes later, he stood at the podium, looking at 200 faces and one that mattered. Alondra was still in the front row. "My name is Drivon Kessler," he began, voice shaking. "And I've spent the last 3 years funding projects for people with invisible disabilities, chronic pain, sensory disorders, conditions that make existing in traditional spaces difficult or impossible." He gripped the podium. "I fund these projects because I understand what it's like when your body doesn't work the way it's supposed to, when you convince yourself you're too complicated, that it's better to stay isolated than risk being too much for someone." His eyes found hers. "Recently, someone showed me that needing accommodation doesn't make you impossible to love. She designed a space for me, not just a room, but permission to exist as I am. And I pushed her away because I was more afraid of trying than being alone." His voice cracked. "But now I'm done being afraid." He stepped down and everyone cheered. Alondra moved towards him. "That was terrifying," he said quietly. "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know if this works. I don't know if we can. I know. But I want to try." He looked at her. "This woman who'd stayed longer than anyone. If you'll let me. If you, still, I'm not staying because I'm fearless," she said, and her voice was steady, even as tears spilled over. "I'm staying because I have decided. And I decided 3 weeks ago. I've just been waiting for you to decide too." His breath left him in a rush. "Come home with me," he said. Let us, see what this looks like when we're both choosing it." She nodded once. They left together. The drive back to the estate was silent. Not the careful professional silence of before. Something heavier, more fragile. Drivon's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. Alondra sat in the passenger seat, watching the landscape blur past, her heart hammering against her ribs. When they arrived, they walked through the entry hall, down the corridor, toward the east wing, toward the room she'd built. "Talk me through it," Alondra said softly. "What happens? What should I watch for?" He loved her for asking, for treating this like the design problem it was, something that could be understood, planned for, navigated. "It starts with tension," he explained, his voice steadier now that they were talking. "Like my muscles are contracting everywhere at once. Then the pain, sharp, electrical, concentrated in..." He gestured vaguely. Everywhere, intimacy would normally register pleasure. It peaks fast, between 5 and 15 minutes usually. Then it fades, but slowly. The aftermath can last hours. What triggers it specifically? Just touch or touch combined with arousal. He forced himself to be clinical, even as his heart raced. Physical contact when my body is responding to desire. It doesn't have to be an intimate touch. Just being close to someone I want, if there's any physical contact at all, it can trigger the response. My nervous system doesn't differentiate between affection and intimacy when desire is involved. So right now, she glanced at the minimal space between them. Are you all ready? Yes. The admission was raw. I've wanted you since the day you walked into my house. Being this close to you, knowing what we're about to try, my body is already preparing for it, already on alert, which means the window before pain hits is very small. She nodded slowly, processing. Then we should be intentional. Make every moment count. Alondra, you don't have to. I want to. She met his eyes. I want to know what this feels like, what we feel like, even if it's brief. His throat went tight. Okay. They sat together on the carefully designed seating she'd built into the space, modular, adaptive, positioned so someone could move quickly if needed. Close but not touching yet. Drevon's hands were shaking. He clasped them together to steady them. We'll go slow, she said. And the second it starts, you tell me. No protecting me from it. Not trying to push through. The moment you feel the tension building, you say something. Deal? Deal. She reached out slowly, telegraphing every movement. Her hand stopped 6 inches from his face. May I touch you? His heart was slamming against his ribs, every cell in his body screaming contradictions, want and terror, and the desperate hope that maybe this time would be different, that maybe desire didn't have to equal destruction. Yes, he breathed. Her palm touched his cheek, warm, steady, real. For 3 seconds it was perfect. For 3 seconds it was just touch, just her hand on his skin, and the terrible, wonderful feeling of being wanted without shame, without walls between them. Her thumb brushed along his jaw. He leaned into it, starved for contact he'd denied himself for years. His eyes closed, his breathing deepened. Okay, she whispered. Yes. His voice was rough with emotion. God, yes. Can I come closer? Please. She shifted on the seat, closing the distance between them until their knees touched. That small point of contact sent electricity through him. The good kind. The kind he'd almost forgotten existed. Can I? His voice caught. Can I touch you? Yes. He lifted his hand slowly, carefully, like she might disappear if he moved too fast. His palm touched her face, mirroring her gesture. Her skin was soft and warm and real, and he wanted to memorize every detail of this moment before anything happens. His other hand found her waist, tentative, asking permission with pressure. She leaned into him, and it was answer enough. I'm going to kiss you now, she said softly. Tell me if... Please, he whispered. Please, Alondra. She leaned in and kissed him. Soft at first, a question. He answered by pulling her closer, his hand moving from her face to tangle in her hair, her arms wrapped around his shoulders. She was warm and solid here, and for 10 seconds, maybe 15, it was everything he'd imagined, and nothing he'd dared to hope for. Her mouth on his, her body close enough to feel her heartbeat against his chest. The feeling of being desired and desiring in return without fear, crushing the space between them. His hand traced down her spine. She made a small sound against his mouth that sent heat flooding through him. And that's when it started. His body betrayed him. The tension hit first, like every muscle in his body contracting at once. His hand on her back went rigid. His breathing stopped. He broke the kiss, pulling back just enough to gasp out. It's starting. Alondra didn't let go, but her grip loosened, ready to release him if needed. What do you need? Down. I need to... She helped guide him down to the floor, to the exact spot she'd designed for this. Soft surface beneath him, nothing sharp or hard nearby. She knelt beside him, one hand still on his arm, grounding, not restraining. "I'm right here," she said. "Tell me, what helps?" The pain arrived like a lightning strike, white-hot and everywhere, radiating from his core outward, concentrated in every place that had just felt pleasure seconds ago. Every nerve ends firing wrong signals, touch receptors translating to agony, pain instead of sensation. His back arched off the floor. A sound tore from his throat, animal and raw and utterly beyond his control. "Breathe," Alondra's voice cut through the chaos. Steady. Calm. Anchoring. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. I've got you." He tried. Failed. His hands were clawing at the floor, looking for something to anchor to, some way to escape his own body. "Do you want me to let go?" she asked, her voice still steady, even though he could hear the strain beneath it. "No." The word came out broken, desperate. "Stay. Please stay. Don't leave." "I'm not going anywhere." Her hand pressed more firmly against his arm. "I'm right here. You're safe. This will pass." The pain crested. Wave after wave. Electrical. Searing. Concentrated in places that should have been singing with pleasure, but instead were screaming. He lost track of time, lost track of everything except the sensation of his body betraying him and her voice in his ear, steady as a lifeline. "You're doing so good. Just breathe. I'm right here. You're not alone." His vision whited out, his muscles locked so tight he thought something might tear. Distantly, he was aware he was making sounds, gasping, sobbing, incomprehensible. Distantly, he was aware this was exactly what he'd been terrified of, being seen like this, reduced to nothing but pain and need. But she didn't leave. Minutes passed. Could have been 5. Could have been 50. Time lost all meaning when every second felt like drowning. Slowly, infinitely, cruelly slowly, the intensity began to decrease. The white-hot agony dulled to a deep, throbbing ache that radiated through his entire lower body. His muscles started to unlock one by one. His breathing came easier, though still ragged. Drevon became aware of his surroundings again in pieces. The floor beneath him, the exact texture she'd chosen, soft enough to be comfortable, firm enough to be grounding. The temperature of the room, perfectly calibrated, not too hot despite the sweat soaking through his shirt. The acoustic panels absorbing every sound so his gasps didn't echo back at him, her hand still on his arm, gentle and grounding, and still there. "How long?" he managed, his voice wrecked and raw. 11 minutes, she said quietly. It had felt like dying. He tried to pull away, shame flooding hot and sick through his chest. This was what she'd signed up for. This was what he'd warned her about. But knowing it intellectually and witnessing it were two different things entirely. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm so sorry. Stop!" Her voice was firm but not harsh, not angry. "You don't apologize for this. Not to me. Not ever." "You saw." He couldn't finish, couldn't articulate the humiliation of being seen like that. Vulnerable and broken, and making sounds he couldn't control. "You saw what I'm like when—" "I saw you being brave," she interrupted. "I saw you choosing to try even though you were terrified. I saw you trusting me enough to let me witness your pain. And I saw exactly what I expected to see. Someone whose body works differently and who's been suffering alone for far too long." He finally looked at her. Really looked. Her face was wet with tears. Her hands were shaking slightly. But her expression wasn't pity. It wasn't fear or disgust or horror or any of the things he'd been dreading for 3 years. It was fierce, unwavering certainty mixed with something that looked like grief, not for him, but for all the time he'd spent believing he had to endure this alone. "This is what it looks like," he said hoarsely. "This is what you're signing up for. Pain and limitations, and a relationship that has to be designed instead of spontaneous. Moments that end like this. Intimacy that comes with timers and recovery periods, and the very real possibility that some things just won't be possible for us. Ever. Are you sure? She leaned down and kissed him again. Soft, careful, deliberate, a choice made with full knowledge of the cost. His body tensed, instinct preparing for pain, but it didn't come. Not yet. The refractory period, that small window where his nervous system was too exhausted to trigger again. Just her mouth on his, and the sound of his own heartbeat, and the impossible, fragile hope that maybe this could work. When she pulled back, she was smiling. Small and sad and real and more beautiful than anything he'd ever seen. "I'm sure," she whispered. "This doesn't scare me away, Drivon. It just tells me what we're working with, the parameters we're designing around, and we'll figure it out. Together. One moment at a time, just like we figured out the East Wing." His throat went tight with emotion he couldn't name. "What if it's not enough? What if I can't give you what you need? What if—" "You're already giving me everything that matters." She brushed his sweat-damp hair back from his forehead with infinite gentleness. Honesty, trust, vulnerability, the willingness to try even when you're terrified. That's not nothing, Drivon. That's everything. He closed his eyes, letting her words sink into the places that had been hollow for so long they'd started to feel like permanent voids. "Stay tonight," he said. Not a question, a request, a plea. Not for, just stay. Let me fall asleep knowing you're still here, that you didn't walk away. Okay. She helped him move to the bed built into the space, the one she'd designed with adjustable firmness and temperature control and every accommodation she could think of. They lay together on top of the covers, not touching beyond her hand in his, the amber lighting slowly shifting to match the darkening sky outside. Drevon's body ached everywhere, wrung out and exhausted in a way that went beyond physical. But for the first time in 3 years, the pain didn't feel like punishment. It just felt like the cost of reaching for something real. And Alondra stayed, exactly like she promised. Not because she was fearless, but because she'd decided. And for the first time in 3 years, Drevon Kessler believed that wanting someone didn't have to mean destroying them. It just meant choosing them, again and again, with clear eyes and honest hearts, and the knowledge that nothing about this would be easy. But easy had never been the point. The point was staying. And she was still here. 2 months later. Drevon woke to sunlight, and Alondra's hand resting on his chest. Light touch, intentional, the kind of contact they'd learned to navigate through careful experimentation and honest conversation. Mornings were safer, low arousal, low stress. Touch could exist here without triggering the response that had defined his life for so long. "You're awake," she murmured, not opening her eyes. "How do you always know?" "Your breathing changes," she smiled. "You stop trying to stay perfectly still." He turned to look at her, hair messy from sleep, face soft and unguarded, beautiful in a way that made his chest ache, the good kind of ache. "How are you feeling?" she asked, the question that started every morning. "Good. Calm. You?" "Same." She propped herself up on one elbow. "I have that accessibility board meeting at 10, the community housing project. They want to use your feedback about the environmental controls," he said. "Our feedback," she corrected. "This doesn't work without what you understand about living with limitations most people never see." It had taken him weeks to believe that, to accept that his experience could help others. Alondra had suggested they collaborate. She'd design, he'd consult based on lived experience, fund projects that made space for people like him. The first project had been terrifying, a private residence for someone with chronic pain. Drevon had consulted quietly, sharing what worked in the East Wing. The client's response had broken something open in him. "For the first time, I have a home that doesn't fight against my body." After that, he'd stopped staying invisible. They'd formed Kessler Frost Design Collaborative, trauma-informed, accessibility-centered residential design for people with invisible conditions, people whose bodies didn't work the way they were supposed to. The work was challenging, emotionally exhausting sometimes, but it was also the most meaningful thing Drevon had ever done. I'm meeting with the neurologist today, he said quietly. She might have new approaches for pain management. Do you want company? No, but thank you. He'd learned to ask for what he needed. I'll tell you everything after. She kissed his forehead, brief and sweet. I'm proud of you. For going to a doctor's appointment? For still trying, for not giving up on the idea that things might get better. His throat went tight. 2 months, and she still said things that unraveled him in the best way. The house had changed. The East Wing was no longer sterile. It had become their space. Some nights when his pain was high, Drevon retreated there alone. Other nights, Alondra joined him. They'd read, talk, exist together. The rest of the house had come to life too. Books on tables, Alondra's sketches on the refrigerator, cooking smells in a kitchen that had always been pristine. The beautiful mess of 2 people actually living. That evening, they sat on the roof terrace, the place he used to go alone. Now they shared it, watching the sunset. How was the appointment? She asked. Good. New pain management protocols. Nothing curative, but better strategies for reducing episodes. That's hopeful. It is. He paused. But even if nothing changes, even if this is as good as it gets, I'm happy. For the first time in years, I'm actually happy. Alondra reached out her hand, palm up. An invitation, not a demand. He took it. They sat as darkness fell, 2 people who'd learned that intimacy wasn't about perfection. It was about choice, about showing up with clear eyes and honest hearts, about building a life that made room for difficulty without being defined by it. It wasn't perfect. Last week, he'd had an episode that lasted 6 hours. Alondra had stayed calm, managed the environment, been there when it passed. The next day, they'd cried together, grieved what his condition took from them. Then they'd gotten up and kept going. Because that was the truth. Loving someone with limitations meant showing up. Again and again. In the hard moments and the good ones. In the pain and in the careful joy they built between. The estate that had once been a prison had become something else. A home, a workplace, a testament to what was possible when 2 people refused to accept that complex meant impossible. Drevon Kessler's life had not become easier. It had become honest. There was no miracle cure, no sudden freedom from limitations. What changed was that he stopped treating his condition like something he had to carry alone. Together, they'd created something neither could have built separately, healing-centered spaces for people the world often forgot. Quiet advocacy through their work, a relationship that proved love didn't require traditional intimacy to be real. The work was hard, the pain was real. But so was the joy they found in the spaces between. In the end, people still whispered about Drevon Kessler, still wondered what made relationships so difficult for him. But Alondra knew the truth. He was never too much. He was never broken. He was just a man whose body worked differently. A man who'd been waiting for someone who understood that different didn't mean impossible. Everyone thought Drevon Kessler needed to be handled carefully, but all he ever needed was someone who stayed. If you love dark romance stories, obsession, morally gray billionaires, and love that crosses every line, subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss every stories on this channel.